Hello and welcome to another episode of our Midweek conversation at First Baptist Sweetwater, where we strive to be the first responders of God's love. My name is Jerry Hendricks. I'm here with good friend Teek Hamilton. And Teek, thanks for all the birthday wishes yesterday.
You're welcome.
You instigated quite a few, and
Just in our area.
you did a really good
I
job.
did like how you said it is my birthday, so there's that.
Yeah.
In case Teek hasn't told you yet.
Yeah, right. Well, I just kind of wanted to put it out there. I want to acknowledge the elephant in the room. And sometimes I feel like that particular thing is an elephant in the room. So,
Yeah, it is.
yeah.
Birthdays.
You treated me to some good cake on the youth floor. Kids sang to me. It was fun.
They were waiting for you to come up, And I was like, he's got to be coming at some point. Let me text him. And you said, this sounds like a trap. I was like, well, it is. So
Well, I had this hanging on this voice that I
Right.
picked up at the stock show.
Yep.
And which apparently is just a part of being in the stock show, which I don't know what that means for me in the future. But I'm just trying to make it not uncomfortable for everyone, and I didn't want people running for the classrooms when they heard me.
Right.
So,
You made a good point. If someone shows up in a mask, then you automatically assume they've been exposed, so you stay away.
right.
And then if someone sounds like you sounded,
It's
automatically stay
it's
away.
a very frustrating thing, this
It is.
pandemic.
Yes, it is.
So, anyway, it's a good day, really good day. We had a good time in worship. Our worship band has done a really good job leading us in this interim period. And we'll have Jonathan Jones, of course, coming back this Sunday for the start of our Summit series. Mm-hmm. But, man, really proud of and appreciative to our band for leading us through this and leading us in some different, getting more people involved and everything. It's been really good.
They've really stepped up.
Yeah, so appreciate those guys that are involved in that process. So Sunday, I wanted to do, in my head, I have called this the State of the Church Address, and I confess to you, either on air or personally, that I don't feel like I ever do those very well, or maybe I feel like I do it all the time. Maybe that's it.
I was about to say, maybe it's part of your regular conversation.
Yeah, maybe. Hopefully that is.
Which might be good.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how you work with giving also.
Right.
I mean, a lot of people, they automatically cringe when they hear a giving sermon, but you talk about giving so regularly as a part of the disciple, or being a disciple, that it's not as painful whenever you experience those giving sermons.
Yeah, it seems that way. But I think, so Sunday I wanted to cover the Great Commission and the first part of Acts, and I did this really with that rhythm idea that I've been using, that it was the end of those last things that Jesus shared with his disciples, and the last thing that he did was commission them to be his disciples in the world.
Right.
And so that's going to lead into, I didn't say this yesterday, but it's going to lead into a series that I will begin after the Summit series, and we're going to do a little bit deeper look at what it means to be a disciple. And so this is something that I've spent a good amount of time thinking about, particularly, I guess this particular journey started with me maybe 2 years ago. But I do feel like that of all the things that I do in my life, I'm called to make disciples. I really believe that's my mission. That's what I strive to do, whether it comes through mentoring or leading a church staff or a deacon body or whatever. I feel like that idea pretty much just comes out of who I am, just as a part of either conversation or friendship and relationship. But one of the things that I think that I've struggled with most of my career is this idea of discipleship. And so what I've tried to do recently is to eliminate that word from my vocabulary.
Right. I almost said it earlier.
And refer to it as being disciples.
Right.
It is a little harder for conversation because, as I was sharing with you before we got started, people have this mindset of discipleship. And we've kind of elevated it in our ministries to make it seem as if it's something deeper or more meaningful. But the reality is that if a person calls themselves a disciple and they're not making disciples, then they're not a disciple.
Right.
And so discipleship to me has the implication or implies that you're doing the process. And so, like a lot of things in church or life, it's one thing to go through a process or to go through the motions.
Right.
It's like one of my favorite commercials now is the guy that's on. It's Mayhem.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
You know, he's on a stationary bike, and he's been.
Oh, yeah.
You know, he's, what does he call it, 18 miles to nowhere?
Yeah.
I think that's where discipleship goes. That if it doesn't get us to making disciples, then it's not really discipleship.
Right. Because whenever you say discipleship, especially coming from the 5, whatever that Rick Warren did, discipleship was one of those.
Yeah, the purposes of the church, yeah.
Yeah, whenever you did the little deal like they said, where you put a paper out and you write all things under it, if you write down discipleship, it's always just another Bible study.
Yeah.
Or we're doing the women's Bible study, the men's Bible study, the youth Bible study. That's discipleship. And that's not necessarily making disciples. That's adding a lot of good, maybe learned knowledge,
Right.
Bible knowledge, but not necessarily in the process of becoming a disciple.
Well, and I was listening to you right there. It dawned on me that most people who listen to this podcast regularly, both of our listeners, that's a reference to last week. But anyways, this is a little deeper conversation than what we normally have.
Mm-hmm.
But it is something that I'm deeply passionate about.
And it's one that's going to make people think also.
Well, I hope so.
Because that is a word that we use often. And it's probably one of those, it's similar to those words that we use that we never define, and they're the churchy words. And now that we're defining it, it's coming out that it might not be the best approach to making disciples.
Well, and so I haven't decided yet, because this I won't start this series for, a month nearly.
Right.
But 2 words that have stood out to me that are problematic for today's disciples. One is discipleship, and we've talked about that. And I think we started this conversation prior to recording, talking about how we felt maybe discipleship had evolved in our ministry careers and how we had viewed it. But the other one is a word that I knew never did really set well with me, but it became so popular, and we still use it a lot, but it's a word that I do not prefer at all, and it's the words Christ follower. And so the association that I've made in messages here and in curriculum that I've written is that if you want to consider yourself a Christ follower, then you need to read the story of Jesus and observe who were the followers.
Right.
And how they were distinguished from those who were really disciples.
Right. The crowds.
Yeah.
We talk about writing curriculum. I'd never use the word Christ in those unless it's talking about the role of the Messiah. Like, that's just a personal thing. I use Jesus over and over again. Because I really think that if you ask a lot of students and younger, they're probably going to tell you that Jesus' last name is Christ. Because we always say Jesus Christ. And even in that, I'll say Jesus the Christ. Because making that distinguish of Christ was the role that Jesus took, not necessarily a name attributed to him. And so when you talk about that Christ follower, the crowds followed, and then they left.
We have said, one of the things that I liked about our church before I got here, y'all had already gone through a process and one of transition, and in the part of that transition, you acknowledged that vocabulary was important, that words are important. Right. And so obviously you and I felt that way prior to joining together as a staff team. But I see how I was around when that phrase became popular among churches that were the fast-growing churches, the sort of the consumer-driven churches that began to emerge really around 1990, somewhere in there.
I was alive then.
Yeah, you were, and so was I. But and I get, because I think that those words might have been important at that time, but then now we're kind of in a state of confusion about that, where now culturally relevance seems far more important in authenticity. And I've always kind of, after a period of working through that, I always kind of went back to, well, at Antioch they call them Christians. Let's just do that.
Right.
And if people don't understand that, I'm not going to assume that they understand Christ follower any better.
Right.
And if Christ follower leads them down a path of false discipleship, then I'm not going to take that trek.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, that's a little too much for today.
Well, no. I was thinking about, you were talking about you use the Great Commission Sunday. I think a lot of it is that we focus too much on the word go, or or maybe they just focus on the go of the Great Commission, and that was the idea of going and starting new churches, getting more people to follow Christ, and getting their hell insurance, their fire insurance was a popular word also, as opposed to thinking it was important to create disciples and to do the hard work. I mean, it's a very watered down gospel, which I really don't like that phrase, but it's a very easy gospel. When Jesus says, "Take up your cross and follow me," well, that's when the crowds leave.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a challenge. But you look at the other side of that a lot of times what we've experienced in church ministry and discipleship is that it seemed to occur around either a good book,
right?
A lot of times
right.
around a good book that seemed to communicate well, but that became the centerpiece, and not even the teaching of the book. It was sort of the book itself.
Yeah.
That and I can thinking through some of those things. I don't want to name those this morning. I might do that later, but
that'll be a special
that'll be one
episode.
of those things where I show some discretion during the podcast.
Nice, I like it.
Yeah. I mean, since we don't edit, I don't know if y'all knew that.
No, we're just straight through.
We straight through.
This is the first time we've restarted in a long time.
Once we get started, we're straight through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So. And I'm okay with that because, people know us for who we really are. Slip-ups and all.
There you go. Well, so those are two words that I've been thinking a lot about here recently as I've looked into this series on being a disciple. And I have struggled with trying to make sure that I use those words in my messages and distinguish those. It's hard because the others' words seem to flow more naturally.
Right.
Maybe that's because we're accustomed to them, or maybe it's not. It's just it's the way it goes.
But it's become part of our language. Yeah?
Right. And so hopefully that will serve as sort of a launching point for our conversation, which I do hope leads us into deeper conversations about being a disciple and bearing fruit.
Right, and that's been a good conversation we've been having with the book Future Church and talking about what it means to be a disciple. Like you said, you're not a disciple till you've made a disciple.
Well, you've given me some notes for the future series, and I appreciate that.
Excellent.
Having these conversations with Teak is so beneficial. So
that's why we really do it.
So speaking of words that are important, another phrase that we hear a lot in church life is kingdom of God.
Mm-hmm. And I like that phrase.
It's a really good word. And I'm hoping that we have more clarity on what that means after our summit series.
I bet we
Did you see what I did there?
I did. Nice transition.
Okay, it was. Starting Sunday, Dr. Miles Words is going to be...
published author, Dr. Miles Words.
The guy is a big deal.
We talk a lot about how we have these friends who are authors, and I think sometimes people don't believe us when we drop names like Bob Goff and everything, but we do. But Miles is one of those friends who's a published author.
Has Bob responded to your request to be on the podcast?
No, not yet.
Okay,
not yet.
We're still waiting.
Well, I'm about to just call him because he puts his cell phone number in there.
Got his phone number.
I have his phone number. I mean, if that doesn't say friendship, because there's a lot of people that won't give me their number.
Well, you probably shared too much there.
Right. But Dr. Miles Words, a published author, another one of our friends will be here.
Yeah, and we've heard he spoke here in my absence last year. And he'll be back, and we're doing a 3-week series on some parables in the kingdom of God. I'm really excited about this. I'm, for one, just be able to be with him for 3 weeks running.
Right.
He's a super practical person, a high thinker though, and but puts it in a way that I think we can all grasp it.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that's why so many people have endeared themselves to him or him to them.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, one of those.
It's there.
But he's definitely one of those that we'll enjoy getting to hang out with. Then one of the unique features that we added to this, not only will he be speaking each of those 3 Sundays, We'll be learning a little bit about the Baptist Study Center
Right.
at Abilene Christian University, which he directs that program, and he's an associate professor at ACU, or an associate professor of theology at ACU, Abilene Christian. And but we'll have a time where next week he will be. We'll interview him for the podcast.
Right. That's exciting.
And so
Our first really big name
well,
outside of our names and Streetbacks.
and Glenn Harrison maybe.
Glenn Harrison House.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had a few. It's been a while. But we're going to do that in the fellowship hall while we're all enjoying some chili together.
Right.
And it should be fun.
And it's supposed to be cold that day, right? So chili's a good call,
Chili's always a good idea.
especially if it's on a hot dog or Frito pie. I know I'm coughing too.
I think we're about done. My voice is played out. It lasted for me Sunday all the way through.
Yeah.
But I think I've about talked myself out. Thanks for being on the podcast. We look forward to seeing you Sunday.
See you then.